Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast live stream. A very busy day here in Watchman world. I'm kind of rushing around, getting ready for a trip. I am going someplace, I'll just say. I'll be doing a little bit of filming on this trip, but also spending some family time, which is the best combination, right? To be able to do both at once. So that is coming this evening. I'm heading out. So I was kind of running around. You know how it is. And doing some packing and everything. And when you're with your family and they're also going on the trip, that gets really involved. But it's going to be a good one. And again, I'll be doing some work as well, a mixture of business and pleasure, as they say. But it's going to be a good one. Just gone for a few days as these, dare I say, waning days of summer. It's not waning yet, right? It's August 10th. Summer, please don't go away. My favorite time of the year. I love the fall, too. It's really beautiful here in the East Coast where I live, but nothing like the summer. As most people agree with me, I would think. I actually like the hot weather. What can I say? I'm one of those crazy people. Anyway, get all that aside, all the pleasantries aside. Welcome, everyone, and God bless you all. And it's great to have you here back for the live stream. I think it's been a few weeks since we've had a live stream because I was traveling and had some other things going on. But it is great to be with everyone, and I will get right into everything today. I want to say hello first, everyone. We have people from around the world already. We will have thousands with us today, no doubt, from every continent, quite literally. Even a shout out to Antarctica and some penguins, some Zionist penguins there who are tuning in. But people from all around the world will be joining us. It's so exciting to have this opportunity to come to you here on the live stream. Okay, let's get into it. A few times people have commented, you're talking too much about stuff and just, shooting the breeze. Get into it. The good thing about the live stream is we have a full hour, so we have a little bit of an opportunity to shoot the breeze and get to know one another a little better. I think that's a good thing, rather than be the usual condensed 10-minute newscast. But I digress. By popular demand, let's get into it. Today we are talking about, we've got breaking news, as a matter of fact, folks. John Bolton, the former national security advisor. Have you heard about this? He was a national security advisor to President Trump. He turned pretty fiercely against President Trump later on, but nevertheless, the Iranian regime has had it out for John Bolton. Quite literally, they have been looking to assassinate him. There's no other way to say it. And now we have proof positive of that. The Justice Department today announced an indictment of an Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps member. I'm going to dig into that, who was plotting to assassinate a former U.S. official on U.S. soil. And this is the Biden Justice Department, folks, who brought this to the world's attention today. And yet, at the same time that the Biden administration is acknowledging that, yes, the Iranian regime is trying to assassinate U.S. officials, at the same time, we have Biden diplomats, you guessed it, in Vienna, resuming those nuclear negotiations with the Iranian regime. Something doesn't quite add up here, right? Shouldn't the administration pull the plug on these nuclear talks now that this has come to light? And we honestly, it's not just coming to light. We reported this on the newscast months ago. John Bolton, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former State Department official Brian Hook, all targeted by the Iranian regime. Look, the Biden administration has known about this for months, and yet they keep coming back to that negotiating table in Vienna, begging the Iranian regime for a new nuclear deal that will only kick the can down the road a few years. It only delays the inevitable, an Iranian bomb, inevitable, not inevitable, I should say, only because of Israel and Israel's commitment to preventing the Iranian bomb by any means necessary. And I do mean any means. So we're going to talk about the Bolton plot. I'm going to give you some more concrete details about it. A $300,000 price tag involved, folks. It's very interesting. We also want to talk about Russia and its continued turn, Vladimir Putin's regime, against Israel. The Gaza campaign from last weekend, 3 days of intense fighting, of course, where Israel took it to the Iran-backed terror group Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Russia was not happy about this. And now they are, at least a top Russian diplomat, is slamming Israel's interim prime minister, Yair Lapid. We're going to talk about that as well. Also, We will have our Q&A, of course, towards the end of this newscast, and send in those questions. Send in some good ones. We'll be answering Q&A. But also, what is the state of play for Iran and its proxies right now in the wake of this Gaza operation? Palestinian Islamic Jihad appears to have been severely weakened during Israel's Operation Breaking Dawn. That's what it was called last weekend. Islamic Jihad seems to have been hurt very bad there. What does that mean for Iran's proxies writ large and Iran's larger strategy in the region? We're going to break that down as well. Hey, we're talking about mostly external threats. I say mostly because, look, this plot against Bolton was on U.S. soil. But obviously, we've got some very troubling events unfolding here in the United States, where I'm sitting right now as well. This FBI raid of former President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I will just say, I don't know where you are in the world watching right now. Again, we have people from all over the world, but this is a very, very dangerous time in the United States, where conservatives, Christians are being targeted by this administration. It seems that's the direction they're going in. If they can go after Trump, they can go after anyone. And a lot of people have said that the past 2 days, but it is very true. We obviously focus predominantly here on the newscast about the global scene and how it affects us here, but just had to mention that. That's a story that has to be mentioned, obviously, a major news development that, look, has profound implications for the United States and its place in the world going forward. Jesus said a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And we certainly have that. I don't know if you're in America, you're not in America right now watching. Again, we're all over the world here on the newscast. But to say that this nation is polarized right now and that this administration is just pushing it and pushing it even more is an understatement. Again, a very precarious time here in the United States. Whether you live here, whether you don't live here, do us all a favor. Keep our nation in your prayers, because we certainly need it right now. Well, a lot of times in the United States, people say, well, what do I care? My dear, beloved fellow Americans will say to me, why do you care about Israel? Why do you care about what's going over there thousands of miles away in the Middle East? Well, folks, I care about it so deeply, number one, because the Bible says I should. That's the main reason. But number two, look, events that unfold in the Middle East, they don't stay in the Middle East. Things unfolding there right now in the world's most chaotic and volatile and strategic region will affect all of us eventually, no matter where we live. Again, what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And that includes that coming war where Israel, look, these are called, what just happened in Gaza, for instance. This is the war. These are the wars between the wars, as the Israel Defense Forces refer to them as. But the big one's coming. And we've been talking about this on the newscast for a while. Israel eventually, it will be multifaceted, involving a possible strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, certainly involving a toe-to-toe northern war with Hezbollah, certainly Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and others. That ring of fire that surrounds Israel will also get involved, and it will be a major one. I believe Israel will prevail in resounding fashion. But in the meantime, these are the wars between between the war, I guess you would say, if I'm saying that correctly. Let's start with that. I want to talk about Russia shortly in a minute too, and this latest Russian condemnation of Israel. It's really unraveling there, folks. Relations between Israel and Russia, and it's all related. The latest round related to Gaza, condemnation over what happened in Gaza last weekend, Israel's campaign there. But Gaza is a good place to start. What's the state of play? How did this all hash out? These 3 days of intense fighting. Let's see, that was August 5th, 6th, 7th. Well, if you listen to Israel, the Israel Defense Forces, it was a resounding success. Israel says that it really made a dent in Islamic Jihad, in specific, its leadership in Gaza. Several top terror leaders in Gaza representing Palestinian Islamic Jihad were killed. 2 in 2 days, as a matter of fact. Last Friday, the northern commander of the Gaza Strip eliminated. Then Saturday, the southern commander for Islamic Jihad in Gaza eliminated. I see a member here, Scott G. 4 months. He's been a Watchman member. Scott, thanks so much for your support, man. We appreciate it truly. God bless you. And just a quick, before we continue, hey, premium membership, if you haven't looked into it yet, we did our first premium member live stream last Thursday where every premium member got a chance to ask a Q&A. So that was cool. So if you haven't seen premium membership yet, check that out on our homepage. Click join and you get all the details. A very good offer there where, hey, we have a little more time with our watchmen and women on the wall to really dig deep in that premium Q&A. But to continue with Gaza, Israel, number one, made a major dent in Islamic Jihad's leadership. Number two, Israel says it destroyed a major terror tunnel network built by Islamic Jihad. And number three, Islamic Jihad terror infrastructure and dozens of Islamic Jihad foot soldiers all eliminated in 3 days of fighting last week. Israel says we accomplished what we set out to do. We created deterrence. How did this all kick off? Even before the fighting. Remember, about a week and a half ago now, Israel arrested the Islamic Jihad leader in the West Bank, Bassam Sadi. We call the West Bank Judea and Samaria. That's what the Bible calls it, so that's what we prefer. It's the biblical heartland of Israel, but the world, by and large, calls it the West Bank. Okay, Islamic Jihad has a Gaza, their main power base, but in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, they have a growing presence as well. Israel made a dent in that presence with the arrest of Bassam Sadi, the leader of Islamic Jihad, there last week. But that started things rolling, folks, and Islamic Jihad right away vowed revenge against Israel. And last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Israel essentially had to shut down all the roads surrounding the communities in southern Israel along the Gaza border over fears that Islamic Jihad would launch some kind of retaliatory attack, perhaps a rocket, perhaps an anti-tank missile, perhaps sniper fire. Israel was on high alert, as we detailed for you here in the newscast last week. It got to the point last Friday where Israeli leaders said, this isn't good. We are essentially being held hostage by Palestinian Islamic Jihad right now. We're shutting down communities. We can't live normally. It was Shabbat as well last Friday, of course, and they're saying we can't live like this. So Israel said we have to break this stalemate, and Israel struck Islamic Jihad preemptively because Islamic Jihad was imminently planning a terror attack. And actually, Israel eliminated a cell that was apparently on its way to the Israel-Gaza border to carry out an attack. In the act, before the act, I should say, Israel preemptively eliminated that cell and then went on over the course of 3 days to really make a dent in Islamic Jihad's capabilities. Now, as that was all going on, and by the way, capabilities, Islamic Jihad, not as strong as Hamas, which rules Gaza with an iron fist. More on that in a minute and why Hamas did not get involved. But Islamic Jihad launched at least 1,000 rockets at Israel, reaching as far as the outskirts of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the central Israel region, and of course, blanketing Ashkelon, Sderot, Beersheba, the communities in southern Israel with rockets as well. Here's the good news. Not one Israeli was killed, first of all. Second of all, Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, whatever rockets it did encounter, it had a 97% success rate, 97% in shooting them down. So a very successful campaign for Israel all around, no doubt. Islamic Jihad gave it their best shot, and they did not have much success. On the flip side, some 15% of all rockets fired by Islamic Jihad, they didn't reach Israel, folks. These were misfires that fell inside Gaza and sadly killed Palestinian civilians. Just as what happened last May 2021, the last major dust-up between Israel and a Gaza-based terror group, Hamas. Several Palestinian civilians, women, children, the elderly were killed because Hamas rockets misfired and fell inside Gaza. Pretty sad, but that's exactly what happened. And while this was all going on, the overall leader of Islamic Jihad, who's based in Syria usually, was visiting Tehran, Iran. What a surprise, what a coincidence or not, meeting with top Iranian officials, and who knows what was being said there, and if Iran was helping to direct the Islamic Jihad war effort from Tehran. I'm not sure if he's still there or if he has returned to Syria at this point, licking his wounds, but Islamic Jihad, even more so than Hamas, is totally beholden to the Iranian regime. This is a full-fledged Iranian proxy that acts on the orders of Tehran. The head of the snake is the Iranian regime when it comes to terror throughout the region and really throughout the world. And we saw it once again last weekend. Now, why did Hamas pull its punches here? Why did Hamas not throw its hat in the ring? I think it's real simple. Number one, Hamas also an Iranian proxy, by the way, not as beholden to the Iranian regime as Islamic Jihad, but very beholden nonetheless to Iran. But Hamas, because hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, Islamic Jihad, for instance, gets between 100 and 150 million from Iran every year. Iran funnels in weapons, trains Islamic Jihad fighters, brings them to Iran for training, ships in weapons parts, and the like, including with Hamas as well. But Hamas gives some pretense that they also govern. They supposedly govern Gaza. They've governed it right into the ground with an iron fist and persecuted their own people there in Gaza, as is pretty obvious, as is no secret by this point. But Islamic Jihad has no such delusions. They're jihad 100%. They have no desire to govern at all. But Hamas was still also talking about licking its wounds from last May still, where Israel put a hurting on them. And Hamas held its fire. They said, not now, not yet. Real simple, not yet. They are rebuilding after last May, rebuilding their arsenal, and they're waiting for the right time another day. And believe me, that day is coming. The next round between Israel and Hamas will come. Also, you have to think that Hamas probably wasn't necessarily too upset about seeing their rival be weakened, Islamic Jihad. Look, Hamas wants to be the big boy on the block in Gaza and in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. And Islamic Jihad oftentimes acts independently. Hamas not entirely comfortable with that, although they collaborate very much so. But Hamas in the past has also been uncomfortable with Al-Qaeda and ISIS-linked groups operating in Gaza. Many ideological similarities, but at the end of the day, not always on the same page, by the way, even theologically, ideologically. But at the end of the day, Hamas wants to be the top jihadi force. Even the jihadis have some differences among them. But at the end of the day, Hamas wants to be the top jihadi force for the Palestinians. So I don't know if they were crying too many tears that Islamic Jihad was weakened. That's another point. But Hamas said, not this time. We're going to stay out of this one. And also, you got to think the people of Gaza are just at this point, I mean, the people who are not Hamas supporters, Islamic Jihad supporters there, who just want to go about their daily business and raise their family, you got to think they're kind of fed up at this point. And Hamas was probably factoring that as well. Could there eventually be some kind of popular uprising against Hamas rule? That looks unlikely right now, but Hamas is certainly, any dictatorship certainly always considers that possibility. So a few factors there. And Israel made very clear to Hamas, we're not targeting you this time. We're focusing chiefly on Islamic Jihad. And that's exactly what happened. So what is the state of play, as I said at the top? And by the way, just to check in with everyone, thank you for watching. God bless everyone. Welcome. If you missed the first, 20 minutes or so, this will be posted under Newscast. This entire live stream will be posted under Newscast when we finish here in about a half hour or so. So you can catch the 20 minutes that you missed. But great to have everyone with us from around the world and around the country. This is exciting as always to have the opportunity. It's a blessing to be able to speak to a global audience for such a time as this. Only God can make this possible for this time in history, 2022. It's a dark time in history, a perilous time, but guess what? These are Bible times. More on that in a few minutes. But what's the state of play? Islamic Jihad weakened. For now, I'm certain they will replenish their arsenal. They will find other commanders to replace the commanders who were killed. Perhaps these commanders won't have the gravitas that the departed commanders had. Think of Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed Iranian terror master who was eliminated in a U.S. drone strike in January 2020. He was virtually irreplaceable for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. They're still very active, as you'll hear in a minute. but Soleimani was kind of a one-of-a-kind figure in that organization. Time will tell whether these Islamic Jihad commanders who were eliminated in Gaza are irreplaceable, quote unquote, but certainly they're weakened. But certainly, by the same token, they will work diligently to rebuild their terror infrastructure and rocket arsenal and the like, and their manpower, and Iran will help them. Key point. When you have the backing of a state actor, certainly the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world in the form of the Iranian regime, you have a much better chance of rebuilding and rebuilding relatively quickly. Hamas has done it many times over the past decade plus, right? In 4 to 5 pretty major engagements with Israel since 2008, 2009. Hamas always seems to come back stronger the next time with bigger rockets that have larger payloads and can travel further distances. Israel, it's almost like a game of whack-a-mole where Israel hits them and hits them hard every few years. Then Hamas rears its head again and they're well armed again. Same deal with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but to an even greater degree. Can you believe it's been 16 years since Israel last went toe-to-toe in a major confrontation with Hezbollah? Now, in that 2006 Lebanon war, I believe Hezbollah had 12,000, perhaps 16,000 rockets, closer to what Hamas and Islamic Jihad have now. But now in 2022, 16 years later, under the watchful eye of the UN organization UNIFIL, Hezbollah has at least 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of the Jewish state, including precision-guided missiles. Not sure how many of those they have, but they have them. And man, is that a red line, and is that dangerous? Because they can hit any target in Israel with great precision when they possess those PGMs. Islamic Jihad weakened, licking their wounds right now, but they'll be back. Hamas rebuilding and likely rebuilding rapidly after last May. The Houthis in Yemen. I'm talking about the entire ring of fire, the state of play for all of Iran's proxies. The Houthis in Yemen to the south of Israel, they made some noise this time around, just as they did in May 2021. They want to get involved in the jihad against Israel directly. That's at least the statements they've been issuing this past weekend and then last May. So the Houthis eventually, with their large rocket and drone arsenal supplied by Iran, they will eventually get involved as well. They are still strong, and there's been a bit of a lull in fighting between the Houthis and the Saudis and that Arab coalition in recent months. So the Houthis are building up. The Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, obviously still very active, large rocket arsenals. But Hezbollah is the one. And we see more tension between Israel and Hezbollah in recent weeks, chiefly over that Karish gas field. Now, just to review, and we've talked about this on the newscast, the Karish gas field is run by Israel. Israel is excavating, I don't know if that's the word actually, but they're gleaning. Would that be the word? Maybe that's not the word either. They're getting natural gas deposits out of the Mediterranean at this Karish natural gas field. It's off the coast of Haifa in the Mediterranean. Long story short, Lebanon, all of a sudden, Lebanon is saying, hey, that's our natural gas. That's our territory. Suddenly, once Israel finds these massive natural gas deposits, funny how that works. But now Hezbollah, which is based in Lebanon and is really the most powerful fighting force in Lebanon, they are now threatening Israel over the Karish gas field and saying, don't you dare. If you continue to get gas out of that field, then we will exploit gas out of that field. That's the word. Then we are going to wage jihad against you, essentially. And Hezbollah has sent some drones in the direction of that gas field over the past month. Not attack drones, surveillance drones, but nonetheless, it's a hostile act, and Israel shot them down. So this Karish gas field could be the trigger for the next go-round between Israel and Hezbollah. Again, it's coming. It's a question not of if, but when, and we know that. So Hezbollah still at its height of strength right now, at least 150,000 rockets and missiles, precision guided among that arsenal, some 40,000 well-trained foot soldiers, a lot of battlefield experience in Syria, some even in Yemen and Iraq as well over the past decade plus, state backing from Iran. To a degree, state backing, not if not backing, at least a friendly relationship with Russia in Syria. No doubt, Russia has been fighting alongside Hezbollah and Iranian jihadis since 2015, for the past almost 7 years. So Hezbollah finds itself in a pretty good position right now. And they have held their fire. They've rebuilt slowly and steadily. And Iran has kept Hezbollah in reserve. But that day of reckoning is now coming. It's an unsustainable situation for Israel. You cannot have a terror entity, which is not just a terror group or a terror organization, folks. This is a standing terrorist army. Hezbollah is a terrorist paramilitary force. That's the best way to describe them, I think. They are one of the most powerful militaries in the entire Middle East, if you can wrap your head around that. Obviously, this is unsustainable for Israel. It's a non-starter. Israel can't accept this at its northern border for much longer. Not if, but when that conflict comes. So Hezbollah strong, and the last player to cover when we're talking about the state of play and the Iranian regime and its ring of fire and where they're at right now is Iran itself. Now, I would have told you before the past week that Iran, look, they've been bloodied, literally embarrassed by Israel time and time again on Iranian soil. Iranian nuclear scientists, Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps officials, officers, taken out, assassinated, eliminated on Iranian soil left and right. Not only that, Iran's nuclear facilities, ballistic missile factories, drone factories, sabotaged left and right, to the point where the Iranian regime must be awfully paranoid at this point. And because Mossad, the Israeli security service, clearly, the Israeli spy agency, I should say, has a very strong presence on Iranian soil with assets, Iranian assets, people who have flipped against the Iranian regime. And I don't blame them, because the biggest victims of that regime are the Iranian people themselves. So I would have told you, man, not good for Iran right now. Although they have a massive ballistic missile arsenal, they're driving for the bomb. They've been taking lumps. And then last week, the West, once again, decided to throw the Iranian regime a lifeline. Well, before that, let me rephrase that. That happened, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But Russia, 2, maybe 3 weeks ago now, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a pilgrimage to Iran, state visit, where he met with Raisi, the Iranian president, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. They need each other, folks, and that Russia-Iran alliance is growing. Russia now needs Iran because Russia doesn't have many friends on the world stage. Before, Iran needed Russia bad. It still does. But Russia now is saying, hey, we need some friends too. Assad, Iran, China, they're standing by us. So that's our friends. We need some friends right now. And that's exactly what is blooming, if you can call it that, a Russia-Iran alliance. Capped off by Putin, obviously, visiting Iran. And again, that gives Iran credibility on the world stage. Hey, a world leader is visiting Iran. Secondly, yesterday, as we reported on the newscast, if you missed it, you can check it out in our archives. By the way, I assume if you're here with us, you've subscribed to the news channel. We've got a few thousand people with us right now. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, we posted all weekend, so you need to get that heads up. Click the notification bell when a video is posted. But we'd love to have you here as a subscriber. As we drive towards 500,000, we're just about at 475,000 subscribers right now. Only God. And we would love to hit 500,000 soon. That's just a kind of a watershed moment, hitting that mark. And we'd love it if God continues to expand our territory and you come on board and subscribe and join the watchmen and women on the wall here every day. By the way, you can also follow us Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We just passed 100,000 on Facebook, which is pretty wild too. So check us out on those platforms as well. We're posting various content there too. Okay. Russia helped Iran yesterday to launch a satellite into space. Again, we covered that on yesterday's newscast. It was mounted on a Russian rocket. It's a big deal. And will that satellite be used for surveillance? Russia surveilling Ukraine, Iran surveilling the Middle East and Israel. Of course, they say, no, not a chance. But U.S. intelligence, I can say for one, and other Western intelligence agencies, and I know we don't have fans of our intelligence agencies right now, for sure. In many ways, people question whatever they say. But nonetheless, I'm just reporting what they say. They say that there may very well be surveillance from that satellite that was launched. So now Iran, hey, the Russia relationship solidifying, right? The China relationship solidifying. The Venezuela relationship solidifying. And then, but you might say, okay, China, Russia, Venezuela, these are rogue regimes. But then, a few days ago, the European Union, they came back to the table. They just can't let it die, the Iran nuclear deal. No matter what Iran does, seemingly, no matter what the Iranian regime does, the West comes back. It's unconditional, the Western devotion to the Iran nuclear deal. No matter what Iran and its Revolutionary Guards Corps do, the West is going to come back and say, please don't hurt us. Give us a deal. We just want this Iranian nuclear problem to go away. Folks, this has so many shades of the run-up to World War II, it is not even funny. And the appeasement, history repeats itself, they say, and those who do not learn from the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. We're there. The level of appeasement here is mind-blowing. When we have, especially by the Biden administration, which, yes, has a seat at Vienna right now, along with Britain, France, Germany. Look, we reported earlier, and we're going to break that down a little bit more, that the Iranian regime is openly targeting U.S. officials, former U.S. officials. They've slaughtered U.S. soldiers in Iraq. They've instigated wars in the Middle East. They're devoted to Israel's destruction. They're developing nuclear weapons and the ballistic missiles to deliver them to the shores of the United States one day. And yet, the Biden administration, you can't get them away. You got to pry them away from that negotiating table in Vienna. And Europe, just as bad, if not worse. Iran right now is saying, no matter what we do, the West is so pathetic and desperate, they'll still talk to us and try and give us that nuclear deal. So all of a sudden, Iran's feeling really good. They've shored up their base, so to speak, Russia, China, Venezuela, etc., the Assad regime, the rogues. Yeah, Islamic Jihad took lumps, but they've still got Hamas in Gaza, and they've got Hezbollah, their ultimate trump card. Probably shouldn't use that term, but that's their ultimate, that's what they have up their sleeve. Maybe I'll say that, Hezbollah. And they might very well get the deal. Who knows? So they're feeling good about themselves right now, once again in Tehran. And they've been feeling really good since January 2021 when Joe Biden took office. Let's see. I want to quote directly from this article from Fox News. Iranian operative charged in alleged plot to assassinate John Bolton. The Justice Department today announced charges against an Iranian operative for an alleged plot to assassinate former Trump administration National Security Advisor John Bolton. Shahram Poursafi, a member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, is wanted by the FBI for the plot to kill Bolton, which U.S. officials said was likely planned in retaliation for the January 2020 strike that killed Qasem Soleimani. DOJ, well, let's see. According to the DOJ, and they're not very popular right now after the events in Mar-a-Lago, understandably, this Iranian operative approached a U.S. resident he had met online and asked for pictures of Bolton, claiming they were for a book he was writing. This is an interesting plot. And Poursafi, this is a convoluted plot, folks, eventually negotiated to pay someone $300,000 to, quote, eliminate Bolton. So he's wanted by the FBI. The DOJ says he tried to hatch a brazen plot on U.S. soil, etc. And yet, you are still negotiating with this regime in Vienna. So I don't even want to hear it. I'm not trying to hear it. You're telling me how bad Iran is, the Revolutionary Guards Corps is, and yet you are negotiating with them in Vienna, ready to give them billions of dollars in sanctions relief. No legitimacy, no credibility. None. for this administration and its foreign policy. None when it comes to Iran. None. That's where we're at. Moving on to nothing else to say there. Moving on to Russia and the increasing tensions, which I mentioned. Hey, we've been talking about this a bunch, right, on the newscast now for months. Prophetic implications, Ezekiel 38, 39, Russia aligning with Iran and Turkey and other, we know that. We've talked about it much on the newscast, but it's just fascinating to see how it's all shaping up right now. Really, since February 2022, the Ukraine invasion and steadily downward, an unraveling of relations between Israel and Russia, with Russia condemning Israel over everything from airstrikes in Syria against Russia's friends, Iran, Assad, etc., over Jerusalem, over the Palestinian issue, over the Golan Heights, even at the UN. It's unraveling. And Israel, in turn, has condemned Russian war crimes in Ukraine. Yair Lapid, in specific, who's now the prime minister, at least until November, when there's new Israeli elections. When he was foreign minister, he was the strongest voice condemning Russia over Ukraine. Naftali Bennett kept it closer to the vest because Israel has been trying to maintain good relations with Russia because Israel wants to be able to operate freely in Syria, where Russia essentially controls the airspace and has thousands of troops aligned with Iran, etc. That's all going out the window, folks. Here's the latest example. The Russian embassy in Egypt blasted Lapid for, when he was foreign minister, as I mentioned, he criticized Russia for massacring civilians in Bucha back in, I believe that was March, April. Lapid called it a war crime. And now Russia says the double standard because Israel is committing war crimes against Palestinians. He said Lapid, quote, shows disregard and contempt for Palestinian lives. And Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, said the other day that the new escalation in Gaza was, I'm just quoting directly, that's why I'm looking down at my phone, I don't want to misquote, the new escalation was caused by the Israeli army firing onto the Gaza Strip. Really? Very interesting. I thought the escalation was caused by Islamic Jihad plotting terror attacks against Israel. And I thought that it was Palestinian terror groups that showed, quote, a disregard for Palestinian lives when they fired rockets among their own people because they use their people as human shields. So it's not shocking that misfires potentially, sadly, kill civilians. But Russia clearly has a different view of that. Isn't that interesting? So just as we watch that continue to unravel, that Israel-Russia relationship with prophetic implications, no doubt, Gog-Magog implications, it's just fascinating and troubling to watch it unfold, but we know it's going to unfold because the Bible said it would. So here in the Watchman, we're going to continue to update you on that Russia-Israel relationship and where it's heading. Another note there, Israel's President Isaac Herzog this week spoke to Vladimir Putin, imploring him to keep the Jewish agency in Israel open. The Jewish agency is it's a link to the Israeli government, not an official government organization, but it helps facilitate Jewish immigration from Russia to Israel. Russia now wants to shut it down. This harkens back to the Soviet days, where the Soviets tried to stop, or they made it very difficult for Jews to leave the Soviet Union and immigrate to Israel. So tense times for Israel and Russia. And honestly, it's unclear how much the facade is going to last, or how much Israel can keep this going. I don't want to say a facade, but look, Israel's trying to keep relations with Russia stable. And it just seems like Russia doesn't want any parts of that these days. And it's not surprising, but we'll continue to keep a very close eye on it. Let's get to questions. Keep them coming. Let's see what we have here. I do want to read one more thing to you as well, if you'll humor me. Let's see here. Questions. Here we go. Okay. But hey, some scripture to encourage you. Didn't want to forget that. We call this watch and pray. I'll keep it short and sweet. The world is on fire right now. The United States is in a very, very dangerous place, thanks to our current leadership. Take this, take it to heart, keep it in mind, and keep it in your spirit. Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7, the Apostle Paul writes, listen closely, folks. Do not be anxious about anything, nothing, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. Hey, have that on your phone, have it wherever, have it close by, and remind yourself. There's so many encouraging verses I could share, but that was on my heart today. And I hope it encouraged you. God, hey, I say it all the time. God is still on the throne. He will never leave you or forsake you. And when the winds are roaring, the waves are crashing against the boat, Jesus is in the boat with you. You don't have to worry. It's not pleasant, I know, but watch and pray. Watch and pray, and remember, God hasn't gone anywhere. He's still in control, and he will never leave you or forsake you, no matter how bad it gets in America, around the world. He is with you. He will work all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, and he will make your paths straight. So take heart. Question time. What do we have here? Let's see. A good question. Actually, okay, a lighthearted question. Rex B asks, are you moving to Israel, or do you already have a home there? Rex, I wish I had a home in Israel. I do kind of have a home there. Our TBN studio is a home away from home. Jerusalem, I consider my second home. But no, I do not own property in Israel. Will I move to Israel? Never say never. You will see what God has in charge. God has in store. You know, I'm a patriotic American. I love this nation, and I love Israel. And ideally, Rex, I would like to split my time between both. I'd love to spend, half the year in Jerusalem and half the year in the States. We'll see what God has in store. Maybe, just maybe, that'll happen one day. And we'll see if, my wife and my daughters would be on board with it. That's another question. But we'll see. But right now, no, I don't live in Israel, and I don't have a home there, although it is my second home. But I have a place, let's just say, where I hang my hat every time I'm there. And some of my best friends in the world live in Israel. It's home. It's my second home again. And when I arrive in Israel, I land, I say I'm home. It's like I didn't skip a beat. And I love it. I love Jerusalem like no place on earth. Good question. I like that. Someone says, huge thank you to Mrs. Stakelbeck, says Kelsey X1. Thanks, Kelsey. Huge thank you to Mrs. Stakelbeck for allowing Eric to do updates while they are on family holidays. Kelsey, she's awesome. My wife, Lori, is incredible, the watch woman. And I don't talk about her too much because she likes to stay behind the scenes. And she says, you talk about some scary stuff. Don't be mentioning my name, but she's awesome. And I have an awesome, awesome family that supports me 100%. Can't do it without that. So she will appreciate the shout out. Believe me, I'm giving her shout outs and props all the time. Okay, let's see. Let's get some serious stuff. It's a good question by Rashonda Oaks. What's a deal if Iran can break out any day? What's in it for the West? What are we asking, begging them not to do? I've been asking that, Rashonda, for, 8 years. We get nothing. If you talk to Western officials and Biden administration officials, they would say, well, we delay it. We delay their nuclear program. And that gives us time to plan to counter their program. You've had years, you've had decades now to plan to counter their program, and you haven't done it in any serious way. I'm not talking about Israel. I'm talking about the West. You're kicking the can down the road. That's the only question I have for you. It doesn't do anything. We don't get anything. In 2015, Iran got to keep its ballistic missile program. Imagine that. And they got to keep sponsoring terror groups around the region. And they received a windfall of billions of dollars in sanctions relief. America got nothing other than a pledge from Iran. Hey, for the deal was 10 years long, right? A pledge from Iran, we won't develop nuclear weapons in the next 10 years. Hey, 10 years goes by fast. I'm 46. I was 36 like yesterday. A decade goes fast, and everyone watching right now knows that very well, especially if you have kids. 10 years is up, they break out. The breakout is close. A month away, and people have commented, well, you've been saying that for years, that the break. If they choose to break out, they could do it within a month. Not me saying it. Intelligence officials around the world, not only Western but otherwise, are saying it as well. So, okay, maybe they agree to a deal for 5 years. And then when the 5 years is up, they say, you know what? We're not going to re-up the deal. We're out. And we're going to break out. During those 5 years, they could build up, build up. It's madness. It is absolute madness. It's one of the worst foreign policy blunders, disasters in Western history. I do not say that lightly. It is an absolute suicidal disaster. But this is where we're at. Good question. Let's see. Erick, Maria Arco, who's a premium member. Thank you, Maria. She asked, do you think Bibi is coming back in power? I was just reading this morning, actually, and she's talking about Bibi Netanyahu. I was just reading this morning that Likud is favored to his Likud party. They're favored to win the most seats on November 1st when Israel goes to elections. Yes, once again, I think it's the fourth time or fifth time. Is the fourth time in 3 years? Or I can't keep track anymore. It's a lot of elections in a short span of time. And Likud is favored to win the most seats. I would say, Maria, long story short question, a short answer. I think there's a very good chance Bibi will come back into power. But is he running up against the same problem he had in the last few elections where it was tough to reach that 60-seat threshold or get past that? We'll see if he can cobble together a coalition once again. But right now, certainly his party would win the most seats above Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party. And Lapid right now is the interim prime minister until November 1st. We have what? Less than 3 months now. And folks, less than 3 months in the Middle East is an eternity. A lot can happen in that time. But right now, Bibi is the favorite, but we shall see. Question from Anthony Bernard. Why can't Israel stop the flow of weapons coming into the Gaza Strip? Well, they come by land and by sea, Anthony, and one major way is this elaborate tunnel network going from Sinai into Gaza. That's a persistent problem, and Egypt has tried to crack down on it, but Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they still find ways to bring weapons in, sometimes, over land, sea, various routes that they have. The other problem is they are now developing these weapons domestically. And so they don't need to be shipped in. They're developing them domestically. And another issue is they're getting billions of dollars from the world that are poured into Gaza every year. And those billions are used to not feed the people and build infrastructure, but build weapons. That's the short answer again. Let's see what else we have. We have a lively chat going on here, I see right now. And thousands of people watching still. Okay. What is your opinion of NEOM? This is a good question from Joe Mama. What is your opinion of NEOM, aka the line in Saudi Arabia? Joe, good question. I just saw kind of blueprint, the map of this new Saudi city, NEOM. Can't say much about it yet. I don't know. It's certainly unique. If you do an internet search for NEOM and what it's going to look like, green, sustainable, all of that. I don't really have an opinion of it yet. I need to know more about it, but it's a bit strange looking, I would say, being kind. The way it's laid out right now, it's long down near the Red Sea coast there in Saudi Arabia. I'd like to know more about the plans for that city, but I am aware of Neom, and the jury's still out on it. I'd like to know more about it. I can't speak authoritatively on that right now, I will say, but good question. Let's see what else we have in terms of questions. Let's see. We have time for one more. Let's see, guys. One more here. I do have to run. Now, this is a good one from Lin Young. Don't you think that Russia, a lot of people said this, don't you think that Russia has already given Iran a nuclear bomb and is keeping it quiet? I don't. I think that Israel would know. And that sounds simplistic, but Israel's security services are pretty much the best. And if Iran had the bomb, you would have seen a major Israeli action already. So no, I don't know that Russia will aid Iran in many ways. But to the point of actually giving Iran a bomb, maybe we could get there, because that cooperation, as I said earlier, it's solidifying and growing stronger. Right now, wow, for Russia to pass off a bomb to, I mean, look, as unwise as Russia is being to have such a close relationship with Iran, at the end of the day, you have to think that Putin's regime realizes, you know, we have a marriage of convenience with Iran, but they're still jihadis who believe in martyrdom and suicide operations. So if I'm Russia, I'm thinking, if we give Iran the bomb and an even more radical Iranian leader comes into power who wants no cooperation with Russia, because again, remember, Russia is an infidel nation. It's largely a non-Islamic nation in Iran's eyes. And perhaps this new leader uses the bomb against Russia. It's not outside the realm of possibility. So I don't think you'll see Russia share a bomb with Iran, but in today's Middle East, expect the unexpected. I will say that. One more, Diane Atwood. One more. How can the West delay and premium member, Diane? Thank you. And again, folks, check out premium membership, and Lynn as well. Check out premium membership on the homepage under join. And we appreciate our premium members, all of our viewers, subscribers. We love them all. But premium membership is just kind of cool. It's a little something extra to everyone who's with us every day that we can offer you. And it helps keep us on the air, which we appreciate. It's a blessing to us. How can the West, Diane asks, delay the Iranian program when we don't even have eyes on it right now? Well, that's a good question, Diane. I mean, look, the UN, Iran has basically shut down those cameras in the various Iranian nuclear facilities, and Iran is pretty much closing up shop and saying, no, we're not going to let you observe what we're doing anymore. They're playing hardball. So yeah, on one hand, the West doesn't have, it does have eyes in terms of satellites, and I'm sure human intelligence on the ground. So there are eyes on it, but how closely is a good question. I would say that Israel would be the best indicator on where Iran is at, even more so than the West, because it seems that Israel has pretty serious assets working for it on the ground in Iran. But a good question. I would say that Israel, that would be your calculus there. Israel has a good handle on what Iran is doing, and the West does as well. But you're right. Look, it's tough to, when you don't have the cameras and Iran is saying we're not going to comply, there's only so much you can keep an eye on, right? Great question. Great live stream. God bless you guys. Thanks so much. We will not be coming to you for a newscast tomorrow, I believe, on Thursday, because I'll be traveling. But Friday, we'll be back. But if something breaks tomorrow, we will find a way to come to you. Even if it's on my phone, like we did over the weekend, we will do it. So stay tuned, and that's why you need to subscribe, so you get the notifications. Click the bell when you subscribe. Good stuff. Great questions today. God bless all of you. Until next time, thanks for joining us. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.